Good evening, everybody. We're now going to bring the November 29th, 2017 Planning Board into order. We're going to start with a prayer followed by the Oath of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising a notice in the Star Gazette and the express times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Let's do a roll call.
Members Correa?
Here.
Simmons?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Wachowski? Pryor? Schneider? Here. Wolf?
Here.
Mayor McKay?
Here.
And alternate Fishback?
Here.
Alternate Frank.
First order of business, we have meeting minutes to approve for August 30th and September 27th. I think we'll do them separately, just for ease. So we'll go to the August 30th first. Any comments? Seeing no comments, let's do a roll call on approving the August 30th.
We have a motion and a second.
Oh, sorry. Motion first?
Motion.
I'll second. Okay, roll call.
Yep. Members Correa?
Yes.
Simmons?
Yes.
Schneider?
I have to abstain. I had an excused absence.
Sure. Wolf?
Yes.
McKay?
Yeah.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
And alternate Fishback.
Abstain.
All right, September 27th, 2017. Is there any comments on those meeting minutes? I have none as well, so I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion.
A second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Members Correa?
Yes.
Simmons?
Yes.
Schneider?
Again, abstaining for an excused absence.
Wolf?
Yes.
Mayor McKay?
Yes.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
And alternate Fishback.
Abstain.
Next order of business, we have ordinance number 2017-09, which is regarding Chapter 243, zoning and land use. This is creating an MF2 multifamily zone. We received summaries by Katrina Campbell and a report prepared by George Ritter, and we've also seen the 2017-09 ordinance as well as the resolution, which we're going to be voting on tonight. But it's a lot to absorb, so I want to give this opportunity for George maybe to give us a summary of what we're doing here.
Okay. Well, as I'm sure all of you are aware, this is an outgrowth of the Mount Laurel COA settlement that was entered into by the council between the Fair Share Housing people and also Mr. Larkin, who was an intervener in the case. The ordinance proposes to rezone about 16.6 acres of ground known as the Piazza Tract, which you're all familiar with, I think, from HB highway business to permit multifamily housing, of which there'd be a mix of, for lack of a better term, market rate housing and also senior citizen housing that he was going to provide there. And in exchange for that rezoning, he would provide a minimum of a 20% set aside of affordable housing. The ordinance that you see before you is essentially the same ordinance that is being used for the development of Sycamore Landing. In other words, it's the same general setback standards, the densities are the same. The primary difference between it is that this basically allows for senior citizen housing It allows them to be segregated, the senior citizens, into a single building. It allows that building to be 4 stories tall rather than the maximum height of 3 stories. That's the principal difference between what you see going up at Sycamore Landing and here. And as I say, this does require a 20% set aside. Those units have to meet all the requirements of COA, and they have to be provided in accordance with the COA's standards for providing housing. This site was reviewed not so much as a re-examination of the master plan, but was reviewed, when was that? Back in 2015, we wrote a report as part of the ongoing discussion of the Piazza Tract as to whether it was appropriate to consider the rezoning of this tract from highway business to residential. And I think what it found was that report, and what's been iterated in my report, brought forward, is that the tract of ground that is being considered, though everyone, I think, would like to leave it as highway commercial, the actual change to a multifamily use was not inconsistent with the character of the area or would cause any real undue harm to the neighboring properties, that it essentially fit, that the highways could handle the capacity, and that there was existing capacity to serve, both in terms of public water and sewer, to serve the project. And that if it was rezoned, we did not see that there would be, as I say, any significant impact on the town or its zone plan if it was carried through. So as I say, what you're seeing here is really the fallout of the settlement agreement or the litigation involved in terms of COA. This will clearly benefit the town. One thing that should be pointed out, and I think most of you were here and have a general understanding, the required number of affordable housing units going into round 3 can actually be met without the Piazza Tract. The town has, through its previous programs to provide affordable housing, have enough units that in theory the Piazza Tract is not required to meet our third round obligation. But since they were interveners in the lawsuit between the township, the Fair Share Council, one of the conditions that Fair Share placed on the town is that we had to negotiate a settlement with Larkin as an intervener. So that's how they come into the case. Now, quite frankly, they will be providing a bonus that will carry forward. It'll be 40 units that can be applied not only to the third round, but they can be carried over into whatever the fourth round will be, which none of us really know. So in essence, I think there is clearly benefit here. The township will not only be able to solve their affordable housing problems through 2025, but they will have a substantial credit going forward from there to address future obligations. And it is on a tract of ground that I think can easily accommodate this type of use, and it will fit within that neighborhood structure. So in that sense, I think it's a good deal. I think it's also a good deal in the sense that it settles litigation that could truthfully drag on for a considerable amount of time and have a great deal of cost. And it settles it in a way that is, I think, suitable, acceptable for the town in the sense of the location for it, but it clearly is a lot simpler and cleaner than continuing to litigate over how this might develop and what our final numbers might be. The one benefit that was offered through the affordable housing settlement is they did reduce their overall numbers by 30%, which is one of the reasons we have a surplus going forward. So in that sense, there was benefit, was concession on their part to reduce the number and give us a little break on that amount. So as I say, I think this is a reasonable settlement. I think it does bring some benefit to the town. Obviously, we will concede some of our commercially zoned ground, but I do think it will have a positive outcome overall. Now, what I put together was one of the requirements of this being forwarded back to you for review and comment is to do an evaluation of our master plan as to whether the rezoning is consistent with the master plan and zoning ordinance of the town. And essentially, the report that I put together, quite frankly, a little bit in advance of this meeting, was to review our master plan and housing element to determine consistency. And what we found, and again, I'm sure most of you are aware of this, is that we are consistent with our housing element in the sense that this ordinance does further the provision of affordable housing. It does require residential development to do a set-aside of 20% of the units for that purpose. So in the sense of meeting our housing goals and consistency with our housing plan, quite frankly, I believe this ordinance is consistent. Where it is inconsistent is that the tract was never looked at for the purposes of accommodating a multifamily housing, or for that matter, affordable housing. And what this memo tries to do is put forth some of the positive aspects going forward that this type of development, if approved by council, would help to support in terms of the master plan. It also recognizes that as part of our center study, which is ongoing, which is part of the later tonight we'll be talking about, this tract is being incorporated into those recommendations, so that it really is a question of timing as to whether it'll be consistent with the plan. Obviously, once the center plan is approved by the planning board and by the Highlands, assuming that these recommendations stand, it would be in those plans and would be consistent. And so what I tried to outline in our report was really the positive benefits, what it might do to be carried forward, and really they're in this report to help council in their deliberation of the ordinance, because one of the requirements of the municipal land use law is that if an ordinance is inconsistent with the land use element of the master plan, council may adopt it. They don't have to have consistency, but they're supposed to set forth, hopefully, points that they think support the rezoning. And what I tried to do in my report was actually outline some of the elements that I thought were positive, that furthered the public welfare, and that they might consider in their deliberation of the ordinance. And so that's why some of the points are in there. And I think that's about it. I can go into the details of the ordinance if you wish, but the type of project you're going to get is really very similar to Sycamore Landing.
And we will be consistent once the Highlands goes through, whether
Yes.
that's a year or 2 years down the road. Its consistency is around the corner.
Yes, it is part of the Highlands Center ordinances that are being considered, and assuming that the Highlands approves our request and that the planning board agrees to forward this up there, it will come back and eventually be consistent with the township land use element.
Right. So we have an ordinance from town council, and what they need from us is for us to agree to it and pass this resolution.
Let me jump in here. Anytime the Township Council considers an amendment to the existing zoning ordinances under the Land Use Act, the council is required to send the proposed ordinance to the planning board for consideration. There's no need for us to conduct a public hearing. You don't have to hear testimony. All you're doing is making a recommendation. You are not adopting the ordinance. That's within the sole purview of the Township Council. George's report outlines all the reasons why the he believes, and I believe, that it's in the township's best interest to adopt this ordinance, and I think it's in this board's best interest and the municipality's best interest to recommend that it be adopted. That's the limited function of what we're doing here tonight. If the ordinance is amended and it is adopted, ultimately what will happen is Larkin will come in to this board with their site plan application. And you'll have every opportunity at that point to have your professionals review that proposed site plan, pick it apart. You'll have comments. So it doesn't mean that they get to put a shovel in the ground once the ordinance is adopted. This is just a small part of the much bigger picture. I also concur in George's comments that the settlement reached with fair housing and Larkin saves the town a lot of money, and it's really a win-win for everyone. There'll be more housing for seniors because some of it is age restricted. There'll be more housing for low and moderate income families. We get Larkin off our back in terms of that site, and then we're way ahead of the curve in meeting not only our present but future affordable housing obligations. To me, this is sort of a no-brainer. I would recommend that you simply, again, all you're doing is recommending that the ordinance be adopted to the board. That is, and I felt so strongly about it, and because timing is an issue, I took it upon myself, and I hope no one is offended, to prepare a proposed resolution that recommends that the ordinance be adopted. I will not hide that in large measure this resolution incorporates directly much of George's report and also borrows to some limited degree from Katrina Campbell's report. Just outlines the history and gives all the reasons why it's in the town's best interest to adopt this. So we have questions. If you have any questions, I think George and I are more than happy to answer them, but I'd recommend you just move on, adopt this, and get on to the business at hand.
It looks thorough. I don't have any questions.
I have one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned 4-story. Are we going to get into that again? We have a 3-story ordinance.
Well, this
If
would...
this opens up to 4 stories, we're opening ourselves up. We made the self-storage go underground to get 4 stories, or do they stay below the height restrictions?
Well, this allows senior citizen housing, because they will have elevators, to go to 4 stories. That's what this ordinance permits. It won't be a variance issue. It'll be permitted under this ordinance.
For the senior
For
portion,
the senior portion, the remainder of the project will remain 3 stories and 45 feet to the highest
the
point.
senior portion was 50 units? I remember.
They're going to provide, yes, they're going to provide a minimum of 50. They could provide more, but my guess is it'll be 50.
And part of the reason for that is for elevators to be cost effective, they need to service more than 3 stories, and even with more than 1 story with senior housing, you can encounter real difficulties for people if they have to walk getting even to the 2nd story, never mind the 3rd story. So this is a compromise that factors in all of those considerations, and again, it's only limited, that height is limited to only the senior component.
I think to elaborate on your comment was if the senior component of this development is a little bit in every single building, then every single building can be 4 stories.
Well, the intent here, though, it's made, I guess the answer is you could argue that, but the senior housing has specific rules. They wanted them all in one building. They wanted the ability to provide elevators. They don't want to provide elevators in the rest of the buildings that they're building. And that's really what I really doubt that they will be scattered. The other reason they won't be scattered, just to keep it in mind, is that when you do a age-restricted building, it's hard to integrate them into market rate units because you're going to have specific restrictions on age and the type of facility you have. So it was their desire to keep these all in one building so that they could better manage it and provide for the services that these type of people need, and also clearly to provide elevators. They wanted to be able to concentrate them, and quite frankly, one of the things we saw by adding the extra floor is it just keeps more open space and doesn't have them sprawl out to do this, because as pointed out, with senior citizen housing, whether it's 4 stories, 3 stories, they're going to have to provide elevators. These people aren't going to walk up 3 stories, let alone 4, to get to their units. So that's really why we did it. The height limit of 45 feet and 55 feet is to accommodate the fact that they're going to do peaked roof architecture. They're not going to do flat roofs. And so we'll see what comes in, but I think we're okay on that. That's my general feeling on it.
I'm thinking the safety aspect too. 4 stories, once fire alarm goes off, elevators are inactive, stay low. So everybody's going to have to walk 4 floors if they're on the top floor. Elevators automatically de-energize. I mean, it's something to be concerned about.
Right. I mean, is that something, the 4 stories for the senior was part of the agreement and negotiations, correct, Tony?
Yes.
Yes.
But remember, during the site plan review process, you'll have every opportunity and the right to consider those public health and safety considerations. I suspect strongly that for the senior building, if nothing else, is going to be sprinklered because of its height, and
They're all sprinkled, even our existing units.
Any other comments or actually questions? All right, then I'll take a motion to approve the resolution recommending adoption of ordinance 2017-09.
Second.
Okay.
who made the motion?
Who made the first?
He was asking for a motion.
Okay, so you made the motion. And do we have a second? Second over there, okay. Okay, let's do a roll call on this.
Okay. Member Storia?
Yes.
Fitzsimmons?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Mayor McKay?
Yes.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
And Alderman Fisher?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Tony and George, for explaining that to us. Our next order of business is the report we have from George regarding the Highland Center study. Let's see. So, George, this is the study that we put together with all the meetings that we've had on what changes we want to make for the Highlands Center. Incorporate it into one letter, and this letter is going to go to the Highlands Committee?
Yes, this is really the results of the work you've done over the last 8 months. This incorporates not only the findings that support some of the recommended rezonings in here, but it also includes mapping that shows your recommendations to the Highlands, what you're interested in doing. This basically incorporates, well, obviously the Piazza tract, which we just talked about, recommending it being changed from HB to the MI2 zone. It includes the recommendation that the area behind the mall next to Sycamore Landing be incorporated into the center designation, and that the zoning on that be changed from senior to HB, highway business. It includes a recommendation to repeal the industrial overlay district, which nobody's ever used, and since we're doing the redevelopment plan, we've lost most of the impetus to actually do that. So it includes the repeal of that, and it also includes the recommendation to modify the zoning around in the older section of town between Route 22 and I'm trying to think, Baltimore Avenue, the rezonings we talked about there. And so, as I say, this includes the background studies, the recommendations to rezone, and the mapping that goes with it. And if the board is comfortable with this, then this would be forwarded up to the Highlands Council for their review and comment. Obviously, we'll see what feedback we get there, hopefully not a lot. And at that point, it would come back here for your final review, and also for you to set a date then to consider it for public hearing on these matters. If we get through that process and it's approved by the planning board as a re-examination, or essentially a master plan element, then it would move to the next stage, would be how and when we'd actually do the implementing ordinances to carry it forward. So this is really a master planning process, and after that would actually come the implementing process that would go into effect if and when we get this approved by the Highlands, and then obviously subject to your review and public hearing.
So as we're moving forward, how do we address other issues that are going to be happening? Do we do an amended plan to Highlands?
Well, yeah, yes, if something changes between now and when, yes, the answer is it would either be incorporated into this if it has not been adopted yet by the planning board, or it would be by an amendment process. We'd basically have to amend our plan, which would be subject to the Highlands review, and then it would be reincorporated back into the plan.
Right, but obviously the Highlands still has to be part of the process for whatever changes
Yes.
come around.
Yes. They have become our partners in this, whether we like it or not.
Well, it's for the right reasons, right? We're protecting.
Well, no,
we're
that's
protecting our
exactly
resources,
right.
so-
I'm just saying we basically have to run it by them. The one thing I also, which was part of this, and we had discussed it, which isn't really a zoning issue, this does involve the recommendation that sites that have been designated as potential polluters going forward, they would have to do best management practices if they're in karst topography or in a substantial groundwater recharge area.
Which they would have to do anyway because they were in the Highlands.
Well, this incorporates it. This basically says they must...
It clarifies it.
That's right. They must do best management practices. It doesn't prevent them necessarily from doing what they have to do, the best practices for their industry.
Looking through it, I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but looking through it, there were a couple things that I noticed the way it was worded. But it looks like basically everything we've talked to is more or less in here with how the planning board voted, as far as I can tell. On the first sentence, and I guess one of the things that is going to be part of the process is when the planning board does decide to talk about the ROM zone, that has to be brought into the Highlands approval as well. Like, so Highlands is going to be involved with that as well.
That's true.
So we haven't addressed that zone yet. On your second paragraph, you mentioned that a study of the ROM zone was completed. It's submitted to town council for a review and comment. I don't know.
That's the old study where we went back and looked at how the district was currently being used. It didn't deal so much with the issues we've been talking about, the concrete plant, the asphalt. It really didn't deal with that. That report dealt with who was in the district, how it was being used, how much acreage was still available, whether they had sewer and water. It was basically an analysis of what was there, who was there, and what type of uses were there. And that...
I think I saw that. Was that the chart?
Yes, that's part of the chart that's in here. So that's in here, but that has nothing really specifically to do with the ongoing issues of how we handle the asphalt plant or the concrete plant. It's just,
or the whole zone altogether.
Well, that's true. Essentially, I guess the good way to look at this is that as it relates to the ROM district, what this amendment would do, if approved, it would repeal our overlay district, which would take out all the mixed-use options in the district and leave it stand pretty much as zoned today. And it would implement best management practices on the industrial users that are there. And as you all are aware, both the asphalt plant and the concrete plant are considered polluters, so they'd have to follow best management practices. But that's essentially what we do here. And the only other issue that comes up is that it says that major polluters cannot locate in wellhead 1, Tier 1. And obviously, there is a potential on the far side of town, not part of the center, because it's out of the center, that could mean that people coming in for development in certain areas there that are under the public well Tier 1 would have to follow best management practices and would be considered non-conforming under the Tier 1 overlay.
This is kind of a side question, I had a couple of ones, but what is the area of that course, where they have to follow best management practices? How much of our...
It would affect everything in any of the non-residential districts. The way we've proposed it's township-wide.
It's township-wide.
Township-wide. It's not just center. It would apply township-wide. If you're a non-residential use.
Under the center description, you said there is approximately 104 acres designated HERS, which is the Highlands Environmental Resource Area by the Highlands Council. Unless I missed, I didn't see what area that was. Did you have a map for that?
Yeah, there's maps. What I did for you tonight, and it's a little late to bring it up, but I know the copy that you got, everything's in black and white. So what I did is I copied all the maps that are in there and gave them to you so you could get a better sense of what's actually on the map. And there is an area that shows the Highlands Environmental Resource. If you drop back to the Lopat Highlands Center Environmental Analysis, it begins to pull out where we have underground tanks, where we have Tier 1 wells, and also, I mean, essentially your stream corridor is what is considered the environmentally sensitive area that follows the stream coming out through the industrial area and passing through town is the primary area. And then you can see on there, at least as identified, as best we could determine, the various types of wells and what tier, we colored them basically on this map, what tier how much of the town they cover under Tier 1 in this area. And so that it's actually a pretty small area of the area has any serious environmental, and quite frankly, most of that is going to be protected as part of your redevelopment area. That's the stream corridor essentially that's being set aside as open space in the redevelopment area. Right now it's probably 90% of the restricted ground in the center area. Now, there's other ground in there, as you know. There's tributaries that'll have some wetlands on it and that kind of thing, but the mainstream corridor is what they're interested in protecting.
And the whole entire center is the carbon rock area where, so best management practices applies to our whole entire center.
Yes.
You can't avoid that.
You can't avoid it. Everything that's industrially zoned in town has carbonate rock under it, so it's...
So the HERS is just this, it's the pink strip going along the river.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the area that everybody would prefer you don't develop at all. You basically preserve and stay out of.
Right, and that is on either side of the river, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to tell on this.
Yeah, on this map, like I say, most of it is going to be protected. A big chunk of it is protected as part of the redevelopment area.
So more or less follows the center of the stream and then...
And the wetlands and the floodplains on either side of it
right,
is essentially what it is.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, jump in. I have a few here and there. I'm going to go through one at a time.
I guess I can go after you. I would like to question, I can put it out now if you don't mind, the ROM and the discussions and the letters we sent in, and it's going on 5 months now.
At Chairman's request, I called local finance board, the executive director, and also the DAG that provides legal counsel, Deputy Attorney General that provides legal counsel, and I was told rather abruptly that they were not allowed to share any information with me, that there's been a turnover in staff, and that the matter could take 6 months, it could take a year, and when they're done, they will notify not me, but the individuals that have been named with their findings and recommendations. So, there you have it. They wouldn't even acknowledge for me that it had been received. That's how standoffish they were.
So we could be waiting 6 months and nothing was ever even given to them.
Well, I know they got it because I sent it to them, but God only knows how long they will take. If you remember, Joe's submission was some 58 pages, and you each offered, well, all of you that were involved, each offered individual responses. Some staff person's going to have to go through all of that, pick it all apart, conduct an investigation, generate a report and a recommendation to the local finance board that will then review it and either accept it in part, reject it in part, adopt it, and then be in communication with the people that are affected by this. It could take years. It could take years. It's government at its best.
And we can't finalize our Highlands Center until that's resolved.
Well, I don't know about that.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say that you can proceed with with what we are, and the recommendations that we all agree on can be moved forward, and the process can continue. If we get to a point where we can discuss the matter of the concrete plant and asphalt plant, that can always be an amendment. Because to do nothing means that the whole system just sits there. We can't process any of the Highlands Center stuff, nor can we proceed with our conformance in any form. We can always amend, just like you can always amend a zoning ordinance. I can't.
Is there a
speak.
cost associated with it?
Well, there's a cost right now. The work that we have done to put this together and to send it up and any comments that come back from them up until you adopt is being covered by a grant. Okay, that they are covering those costs. The downside on that, though, is that if we take no action, then I'll be honest with you, I can't get compensated for any of it, because until we move something forward that they review and approve, none of that grant money moves. So let's put it this way. I'm doing this with the idea that someday we will finish.
And the amendment would be included in the...
Well, when that gets into a whole different issue, I don't know. I can't tell you that an amendment would be covered. We have a fixed set of grants to get certain... I guess the best way to put it is the Highlands wants us to do our best shot at what we want done now to get this thing moving forward. If in the future we want to amend it, I'm sure they have no problem with that. But whether that's covered under this grant, I don't know. They just want us to do the Highlands Center review, come up with our recommendations, and move that process so that eventually we have a set of ordinances on the books that are consistent with the Highlands goals and objectives. That's what they're looking for. And like I say, I'm sure that amending it is something that can be done. I can't tell you, though, quite frankly, that there's grant money how much grant money there is to continue to play. The way we've handled it so far is if we run over in one area, we ask them to shift some money around, which we can play that to a certain extent, but eventually that catches up to you.
I mean, one of the big negatives of doing changes like we're doing is that it costs a lot of money.
Well, it
Right.
takes time and effort. Yeah.
Right, I mean, changing the master plan is costly, and we're doing most of this under the Highlands grant right now.
Yes, well, all of this is being done under the
All of it,
grant.
okay.
The town is not picking up any of my time preparing where we are to date. That's all going under the grant.
I would recommend that we move the process forward, and even if you don't think you have the conflict, and I think everyone where the issue was raised was of the opinion that he or she does not have a conflict, I think you should err on the side of caution. I think those individuals, for the limited purpose of acting on the one issue where there is a claimed conflict, that you step aside, let the balance of the board act on that matter, and then once the decision comes down, if you're allowed to participate and you want to seek out a change, you do so. Otherwise, I think we just need to move off of this, especially after the news that I got. If I thought that the report in Word was imminent, I'd say let's wait another month, but we could wait another month till the cows come home. And I just think it's time for the board to get on with its business, and this is one of the most important things this board does.
It is, and the ROM is part of that report, and the reason why, I sit in a seat here, because there are things I want to see changed in this town. There are things that I would like to see for the future of this town. And to wait for the local finance board, I'll be skin and bones here before I get an answer from them, because I've got some silly DCA complaints against me prior that took over a year and a half to be reconciled. So if that's the case, then we're never going to get an answer on this. And, it's very disappointing that this is the route we had to take because of some stall tactics that needed to be done. And it's really a shame that it's come down to this, that you can't sit on a board that you were appointed to make decisions.
I hear you. By the same token, my job is to protect the board and to protect the actions that it takes, so that I can insulate the board as best I can from a challenge that certain board members participated in certain actions that they should not have participated in. Whatever this board does, someone may end up challenging what's going to happen here. So, again, my best advice is to err on the side of caution. Whether or not you believe you have a conflict, whether or not I believe you have a conflict, really doesn't matter. It's not what we think that matters.
Well, Tony, who would you envision would be able to vote on this?
It's a fair question.
I mean, certainly prior, he's he might be considered an advocate for the asphalt industry. He might be. I don't know if he is. But again, there's that appearance, and so if we're considered advocates against the asphalt industry, which we're not, then he would be considered one. So I don't think he could vote. So who would be left?
As of the first of the year, I don't know who will sit on this board.
No one knows exactly, but I'm talking about it right now.
Right now, there
It would be
were claims that, Mayor, you had a conflict, Eric, you had a conflict. So this side.
I don't think that. No, he didn't have a conflict. Yeah, you did.
Ken
I
did.
did. Ken did.
All right, so
None for me. I never
We
submitted.
don't have enough board members to vote.
So you're not got a quorum.
The charge is
well,
filed.
You don't have a quorum.
you have a quorums are based upon the number of people who are present at a meeting. There can be less people than 5 or 7 that can vote on a particular matter.
It's whoever's present.
That's right. And eligible to vote. So theoretically, you could have 3 people who vote on that matter. Come the first of the year, there probably will be more. And whether they're conflicted out, who knows? Whoever they may be.
Well, that posed the question too. I mean, I could just say anybody's conflicted and write a letter, and they're going to have to follow the same thing. Then they can't vote, because I'm saying they have a conflict.
I guess you could.
And that would be a year to a year and a half delay. I can't believe how long it takes to get a response from them.
And then that becomes the norm, and nothing will ever get done.
Can we process this along? I'm not going to be here next year. As you mentioned, the funding, things that move it along, make some progress.
It's not going to be funded until it's done.
Yeah,
It's money.
as far as the grant money is set aside.
Yeah.
It isn't released until the product is approved by the Highlands. So the iterations that the board takes here and the thought they put in it, that's fine. All I'm saying is that the Highlands doesn't release any of the money on the grant until they have a product in their hands that we support, that the board supports, and they can support.
It's basically 100% done is when you get your money.
Yeah, they don't pay interim, they're not paying for interim work, let's put it that way.
That'd be a disaster paperwork-wise.
That would be a mess.
So this is like a deadlock situation. Is there anything we can move along?
Everything but.
Well, I guess from my selfish perspective, to a certain extent, there's nothing in this proposal, the zoning changes, that changes the status quo as it relates to the asphalt plant and the concrete plant. There are good things in here, the best management practices, the other zoning changes that you thought were appropriate are in here. We can proceed on that. Obviously, that doesn't mean as I say, it doesn't mean that you can't come back and amend it at any time.
Right, we just don't know the costs involved in that, and, we don't have a budget for that on the planning board, certainly, so.
Well,
It's also Highlands approval, right?
Well, yes, but
everything. If you come up with a suggestion for your Highlands Center,
yes.
and the Highlands Committee says, Highlands Council says no, then you have to abide by what they say, correct?
Well, I don't think you have to just accept it. Clearly, I've never run into a case where they've just come back and said flat no. They may make suggestions. And I think they give the town broad latitude as to what they would like to see in their districts and what they want to see work. The only thing they're looking at is, are you embracing some of the concepts to protect environmentally sensitive areas? Are you doing things that are consistent with the regional plan to protect the water resources of the larger community? How you treat, truthfully, the asphalt plant, the concrete plant, or any industry in this district, I don't think they really care all that much, as long as you're thinking about the potential, how it's going to be managed, how it's going to fit on the land. Like I say, the one thing we have in here is that everybody has to meet best management practices, which is their way of dealing with, it's the Highlands' way of dealing with potential pollution sources. They would like the towns to embrace best management practices on all of them, and that's in here. I don't think they'd have any problem with what's being proposed, and quite frankly, if later the board has specific recommendations as to how other types of industries will be managed, I don't think they'll object, as long as it's consistent with their goals and objectives of trying to protect the water resources of the larger community. That's really why they're in business, to protect those resources.
We got to go back to Highlands regardless. I mean, would it be worth it to throw out the Highlands the idea we just don't want anything categorized as a major potential contaminant to be in our zone,
well,
in our center? Just cut it cold turkey. You're not singling anybody out. So if you're a major potential contaminating source you cannot be in our Highland Center.
That-
And just go to the extreme and see what their comment is.
Those are conversations that the board can have. I mean, you can make all potential major polluters non-conforming uses. That could be a recommendation in here, because I'm not saying that's necessarily the best thing to do, but I'm saying you could. That could, because obviously these areas are on cost topography, they're on recharge areas. That will affect more than just the asphalt plant and the concrete plant.
Right.
Your major chemical plant.
No, but it protects the area. What it really does
I'm
is protects the area.
I'm just saying it has more impact than just on them. There are other users that fall in that category.
Yes, there are, and anybody existing would be grandfathered in.
Yes, they would,
Right,
they would
that's
be
correct.
grandfathered, they just couldn't expand without,
Well, that would be up to the board to decide if they want
at
to.
that time.
I mean, obviously,
Correct.
even if you, hypothetically, even if we did that, and Highlands comes back, and the council comes back and says, okay, you're protecting our water even more than what we want you to do, you're above and beyond, we still can make the amendment later on. I mean, it sounds like this would just basically be feeling them out, to get their response, to get their comments on it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it could be that type of recommendation could be included. I'm not saying it couldn't be. It could be.
Anything?
So,
Any comments, Tony?
I moved very carefully on just wholesale excluding all of those proposed users and saying they are no longer permitted. In one way, you may shoot yourself in the foot, because any expansion would then go before the zoning board, not here. And if you're looking to keep some of the businesses that you like in town, they certainly would like the opportunity, if business presents itself, to expand by changing the zoning. You may discourage some of these businesses from staying. Now, you might feel, hey, that's a great idea, but if you paint with too broad a brush, you can cause yourself, you can self-inflict some injuries here.
it would be, that would potentially need to be amended also as we're finalizing this, and
Well,
I would not expect that.
well, remember, this is a master plan, it's not an ordinance, and
Right.
the master plan can make all sorts of recommendations. That doesn't mean that necessarily everything in a master plan ever gets implemented. I mean, besides the issue of the potential impact, it may not be implemented. Just putting it in the master plan doesn't implement it.
As George has said, by moving forward, at a minimum, you require that all of these potential polluters follow best management practices. That's a step in the right direction. Why not get that under your belt and move forward with what you've got? Once the conflict issue has been resolved, once there's a change in the membership, you can always amend the master plan. There's really, I don't see there being a terribly significant cost in amending one particular portion of it. So, for example, as part of the ordinance amendment that you've recommended to the council associated with the settlement, there's going to be an amendment to the master plan. It's not a big deal. It's amending a specific portion that deals with zoning for that particular tract. I wouldn't get caught up in the cost down the road. I think you just need to take some move this forward, take some action, think you should take George's recommendation that really, to a degree, maintain the status quo, but get the protection of requiring all of these now permitted uses, and those who have site plan approval and are in existence, require them going forward to follow best management practices. It may be difficult for you to do. It may not fulfill what you see your goal as being, but I think you need to take some action. Half a pie is still better than... I ate half a pie on Thanksgiving, and it took several days to find a pair of pants that fit.
I have two other comments for you.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Just to follow up on that, your comment right there, and you know, moving forward, if that is, let's say if that was too broad of a brush, it was just something to throw out there, is something, in your opinion, could you say, well, we want to eliminate all manufacturing from the RON zone?
You can construct these zones almost any way you like. This, as an example, this could be an all-office zone. You could decide that you don't want any more manufacturing up there at all. And you could say, going forward, the only thing we allow in the ROM district is offices. Okay, that just makes everybody up there that exists, they can stay, they're just all non-conforming. I'll give you an example. In Chester Township, we had a business district that allowed all sorts of retail, and the Township Council decided they didn't like the idea of having little retail places pop up. They changed the entire district to only allow offices. So the bottom line is we have retail uses along the roads. They're all non-conforming, and none of them can expand without coming into the board. And the open ground that's out there, you know, if we find an office user, fine. But I'm just saying you can do that stuff if that is what you as a board feel is in the best interest of the town, and that's what you want to do. Sure, you can do it. And you can put forth all sorts of mixes of uses in the district. There's nothing written that says that you can't or that it's inappropriate. I mean, it's really your call as to what you envision your town, what your town wants to be and how it wants to get there and where you think the use is. I mean, we could be, the other side of that is if we pick wrong, nothing happens. It just sits there. Now, that may be okay too, but I mean, the answer is it just sits there. So you can develop what you want, but it's an outgrowth of the consensus of what the town thinks their goals and objectives are and their long-term interest in what's out there. So I can't tell you can't.
The report that came in talking about the Highland Center and actually the MF2, the multifamily.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the sewer capacity,
yes,
I believe, and I think I saw something in there that once the Piazza Trap is developed and the other apartments are finished, that the water source is basically dried up, right?
You're virtually to the point where the town, not quite, because the data center didn't get built, but you're basically to the point where the town is going to run out of sewage gallonage relatively quickly. And unless the plant is expanded, which is obviously a regional plant, and unless, 4 towns? I forget now. Come together on an agreement how to change any allocation, that's going to be a major stop on development. And quite frankly, that really was, and I don't want to rehash old history, but that was one of the thoughts that went into some of the uses that were occurring in the ROM, was could you get them in there with very low gallonage users? Because if you get a plant that requires any kind of gallonage, you can't support him anyhow. So the idea was, can you get people in there that don't demand high usage? I'm just saying that those are the issues you're playing with on that area. And as...
The Piazza tract, there is enough sewer for the Piazza tract?
Yes, there is.
That was determined, okay.
That is, there's enough. You know, but eventually you're gonna tap that out, because you don't have a lot, and there's, as far as I know, no one's really looking at the long-term expansion of the regional plant. So it's gonna cap out very, very soon, probably.
All right, so you wouldn't say, you know what, I'd love to have this office space there. We'd love to have you here, but we can't because we can't support your...
Well, you'll just have very low-intensity users, because they'll all be capped out at 2,000 gallons. I mean, you know, so it just means that you're not going to get anything of any scale or size.
Okay.
It's not that they can't develop, but they're going to be limited by what they can put in the ground or get permitted for a plant, you know, a package plant, but that's a whole different game to actually go do their own sewer system.
They probably couldn't there,
Well,
I guess, right?
Well, it would be hard on limestone and everything. I'm just saying that would be the only other way they could get it. I'm sure that truly going to the plant would be the most reasonable way to do it. I mean, as an example, your plastics plant was going to hook into the sewer, and it didn't. They ended up doing their own expanded wastewater disposal system because they couldn't get permission to go under the railroad tracks. They did get under now? Oh, when I talked to Paul, I thought he said they didn't get under. Well, they changed their mind again. Okay, I'm sorry. They are going to hook into the plant. Because Paul, last time I talked to Paul, he thought they were going to do their own system.
No, that's what's up.
Okay.
They lost the bid under 57. They had to drill another hole.
Oh, okay.
What would be the problem with this moving along with the master plan, adding the best environmental restrictions? But come the end of next month, who knows who's going to be here? It's going to be a new board hashing everything out again anyhow.
It's always going to be a new board. But,
I said, who knows if it's going to be a new board?
right. Yeah, it most likely will be.
And then there could be backtracking and
Right.
changes as to things that you've already hashed over and fine-tuned. We're really very close to the finish line. It's another consideration. All the good work you've done, it's not finalized yet, it's not adopted yet. Some of it could fall by the wayside. I don't know if you want to see that either. You need to look at the big picture.
Right, and honestly, that could happen with anything, I guess, inside this report. I mean, this report isn't going to be adopted by the planning board this year. I mean,
No, and clearly it won't be implemented. I guess
it's
the other
we're
extreme
ways
to look
away.
at it is you can send any recommendations up to the highest you want. It doesn't mean that next year this board or council will necessarily implement it.
Agreed, and honestly, that really wasn't the point. Was my ideas, as extreme as they were more or less to get a feel from Highlands, so that maybe next year when we do have the conversation, at least we don't have to say, well, what would Highlands think? It would make the next step easier, knowing whether or not Highlands is already seeing something similar or even more dramatic, and we're okay with it.
Well, I think Highlands will support anything that they think protects the resource. In other words,
So
being
the less is better.
less is better in their mind, I'm sure. So in that sense, I don't think they'd have trouble accepting other recommendations as long as they see that the resource is being protected.
They're not going to micromanage this. They're not
No,
going
they're
to do
not.
it.
I agree. They're not going to micromanage it. It's the problem is here. It's not with that. It's here. I think whatever you send them, they'll be okay with, as long as it's you're protected. No matter what it is, they're going to.
The more restrictive we get, probably the more on board they'll be.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So it's not them. That's the problem.
Right.
Well, I guess the other way to look at this
I hear
is,
you.
do you think what we have here is progress? I mean, it may not be the end-all to be-all progress, But I think it clearly improves the ordinance. It makes your non-residential people more responsible to maintain the environment. And I think it's gotten rid of a few zoning glitches that deserve to be gotten rid of. I mean, the ones we're talking about in here. So I don't see that as setting, I don't see anything, I don't see this as setting any of those issues backwards. It doesn't further some of the ones, obviously, that some of the board members feel very strongly about, but I don't think this hurts the potential to do anything in the future either way. That's all I'm saying.
No, it doesn't. It would just be nice to have it all done in one report. Here you go. Here's our proposal, and it just makes it frustrating. It's frustrating.
Democratic process.
It's a, I guess, a legal delay tactic.
It is.
It's not illegal. I just think it's wrong.
Yeah,
But it's not illegal.
It's wrong because you're doing it for political reasons instead of to keep better the town.
So,
We're not
George,
public
hold on a
comment
second.
yet.
George, on page 12, this is under the non-residential districts.
Yes.
Under, I think it's, if you don't have the same page number as me.
I hope I do.
So under page 12.
Of what?
This is the master plan reevaluation, the Highlands draft. So we're still talking about the Highlands draft. The first paragraph says the township should consider rezoning Lot 9 and Block 102 to HB Highway Business. I think we want to reword that and take out the should consider and say the township plans on rezoning. So we're a little bit more in the affirmative.
Sure, I have no problem with that. By the way, any edits or anything you pick up, just let me know. I can incorporate them before we send anything up there, if there's, because I have a couple myself I found.
And the second paragraph as well, George.
Second.
Take out the "it is recommended" and just go to the affirmative.
Okay.
I think there was a third one.
The last sentence of that paragraph isn't a sentence. The also has...
Well, that I corrected.
Okay.
And I have that highlighted in my own, yes, the site, it should say, the site.
And on page 15, the last bullet, I'm sorry, it's actually the only bullet, where you have a recommendation that the township repeal the PD Plan Development Overlay District. I think we should just make sure there's no objections right now and put it as part of the report to repeal it.
Okay.
Does anybody want to have any comments on or objection to repealing the PD Plan Development? George talked about it a little bit earlier. So that's been historically unsuccessful.
No, there's nobody that's ever applied,
Right.
in truth, for any of it.
So then without any objection, I guess we'll say that change is good and we
Okay.
vote on your preliminary.
My recommendation is that give George an opportunity over the next month to clean this up, to pick up any grammatical or spelling mistakes that are here, to incorporate the changes that have been recommended this evening, and to consider taking action on this at your your December meeting.
I'd be comfortable taking action tonight on what he has. We're only talking about grammatical typos, but I can.
It's up to you.
I can go either way.
It's up to you.
George, on page 21, the list of major potential contaminated sources,
Yes.
that's a list of what we currently have in our district, right? Those are all...
This is what the Highlands gives as a list of major, this is their list.
Oh, this is their list.
This is their list.
Yeah, page 21. I thought it was bigger.
No, this is major ones. They have minor, but
Okay.
those don't have the same standards. These are major.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And just so we know, I'm going to be adding, I noticed one of our maps has already been outdated. Sycamore Landing is obviously provided with sewer now, so that'll go on as a sewered site on the graphics. Back when we did this, they hadn't been put in there originally.
Actually, that did bring something else to mind, George. A lot of locations throughout the report were referring to very local naming conventions for these developmental areas. Could we put together a map that just shows where these areas are in our district? I think Highlands won't really be able to catch up on when you call.
Oh, sure, okay, I got you.
It's
That's not a problem.
District naming map or something
Yes.
like that. I live here, and I actually got, there's a couple of them I had to think about.
You mean one that shows where these projects are at?
Right.
What you're interested in,
So
sure.
Sycamore Landing, well, where is that?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Sure.
That's not a problem.
I think that would be a good
You
addition.
can just add the names to the land use map of the key projects.
Excellent. That's all the comments I have. If there's no further comments, I guess I'll take a motion from a board member of waiting until next month, doing it now, whatever motion you want to make. Any thoughts? Do you guys want to see the final in December, or do we want to give George the go-ahead?
If you're going to include changes to a map and everything like that, maybe we should wait just to see what it all looks like and do it in December.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a pretty big report. We could all read it a second time and see if we come up with anything.
Yeah, and believe me, if that's what you're going to do, anything you pick up, just give me a call or shoot me an email if you find something that doesn't read right. I'm going to go through it again a couple times, but, it never hurts to have an extra set of eyes.
If you want to, George, if somebody wanted to email you a comment on the report, do they copy everybody, or does it have to go only to you? Is there any?
Well, if it's an edit, I'd assume it can go just to me. If it's a policy question, you better send it out to the rest of the board.
Okay, fair enough.
If it's you can't spell, just send that to me.
Understood, that's fair. So, do we have a,
Do you really think that anyone else is going to have any substantive comments on this?
I don't expect to have any.
I mean, everybody's had this has been talked about ad nauseum. It's not unusual for these things to be quote-unquote cleaned up after there's been a motion to adopt something.
And the map that we're adding is just it's like a development naming map.
I'm going to add it to one of the maps that's already
Yeah,
in
it's
here.
just-
I'll just add names to
And
it.
nothing else in any of the maps is going to change. So I'd be okay letting George submit this once he makes his changes. I could do that.
Then the question will be who is going to be eligible to vote on this.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
We don't have anything that's changed regarding that aspect.
That's very true.
So given that we're holding off on the ROM discussion at this point, I think we're all eligible to vote.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I would say maybe the easiest...
That's why you move forward with this whole exercise,
Exactly.
because you could all vote on this.
Right.
Right, exactly. And I think it's good if we're all comfortable with it. What we can do is take a motion to approve George to send this out, and if the motion gets denied, we'll wait till next month, and that'll be our answer on what the board wants to do.
Well, I think you make a motion to adopt this and authorize George to make whatever technical changes are necessary and then forward it on to Highlands Council.
Now, is it actually adopting it, or is it just approving the draft report?
It just recommend,
Yeah, it's
authorize me
recommend-
sending it up to the Highlands for their comments.
Yeah, recommendation is to send the report up to Highlands, I think is the motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll make it. Yeah, I'll make it. I didn't have to, but that's good.
Yeah. Seconded.
We have a second. Yeah.
Okay.
Is this? That's the wall.
Yeah, it's the mall, yeah.
I'll call the roll.
Figured it out.
Yes, let's do roll call.
Okay.
I thought there was a discussion going on. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
There is, but it doesn't concern us.
Okay.
And the motion was for, repeat it?
Sending these out.
The motion is
Proceed along.
George will make the minor changes he needs to and send it along to Highlands, and we'll wait for their response. The other option would be to wait to see George's minor changes, but probably not worth it, in my opinion. So the motion is to let George send it out.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm fine, that's fine.
That's good? Okay.
Members Korea,
Yes.
Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
Mayor McKay,
Yeah.
Chairman Johnson,
Yes.
Alternate Fisher.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. We'll
Excellent.
clean it up and
Thank
get
you,
up to
George.
the
Appreciate it.
There is a God.
Well, we're making steps. We're making steps. We're getting there. Any other topics of discussion before we move to public comment?
It just made, sorry to beat a dead horse, but is there any other way to get a decision other than going through the local finance board? Is there an expert somewhere or an expert in any of this that we can go to for this?
You can solicit an opinion from whoever you'd like, but it's not going to be binding. It's not. The state agency that's involved is the only agency that's duly empowered to make these decisions, unless
They are the top authority on this.
someone initiated litigation, but a judge may say, this matter is before a state administrative agency, I'm not going to exercise my jurisdiction.
Yeah, other than
Exhaust your
taking-
administrative remedies.
Other than taking legal action, that's not the route I was suggesting. I'm just asking if there's any other entity that you can go to.
No. In a word, no.
Tony, with a change in administration down in Trenton, is that potential of prolonging this also? Could there be changes to the finance board or anything?
I think there definitely will be.
Sure there could be, and that could be cause for yet additional delay, and staff could change. Lots of things are going to happen come January.
Right.
I think it's a guaranteed staff change. Could actually make it go quicker, who knows?
My assumption is yes, there'll be changes.
The board made the right decision in moving forward.
I have one follow-up question, Tony, kind of what Donna said. When you said you called the local finance board, they wouldn't share any information. What if somebody's, me for example, what if I called them? Would there be different? Would there be a different reaction for a person?
At most, I think they tell you is the matter is under consideration.
Okay, so it wasn't a confidentiality issue. They just don't share that.
They just don't, period.
Okay.
And they told me, even though I was the one that submitted everything, they will not communicate with me once they've rendered a decision. They will communicate with the individuals who are affected by this.
Wow.
How
That's
through me.
Well, they have their way.
That's just they still live where they live by the time
Question,
they get
Tony,
there.
how does the other board members know that the board members have been notified?
Right.
You don't.
So they could sit here and just keep saying, we never received, well, either it's going to come certified or registered mail, I would imagine.
Yes.
Tony, what was on this file?
July,
Oh,
Middle of July, I believe.
It was right after 4th of July weekend.
yes.
Yeah, that's true. You could say, oh, I did get it, and they said I didn't have a conflict, so now I can vote. How do you know? Anybody could say that.
I guess you don't know.
You don't, because then nobody else will know here. If I'm the only one that knows, and he's the only one that knows, and he's the only one that knows, then, and it's confidential, and Mr. Pryor, how do we know what his is going to say?
I'll be honest with you, as a chair and one of the persons named in this potential conflict of interest, I have the utmost regard for everybody who was named on there as being a very high moral character. If we didn't have a high moral character, we'd be voting on it now and wouldn't care about it.
Right.
The fact that we're actually delaying to hear the response shows that we do have a high moral character, and we're going to do it the right way. I don't think anybody that was named is going to lie.
I hope not.
All right, we can go to public comment. I think I need a motion. Do I need a motion to go to public comment? Let's just go to public comment then.
My name is John Betts. I'm at Rakely Gardens Apartments on Red School Lane. When you're looking at all these developmental things in the town, and in this town, I think you all know it, the future comes, the cost of school goes up, the cost of road repair goes up, the delay on business development creates rates and tax rates when the value of the properties don't go up. And if the property value doesn't go up, you face a higher tax rate. The higher tax rate raises your nominal taxes. And me being in an apartment complex and building the Piazza tract and the townhouses and all said such, and I don't exactly pay the taxes, but it's in the rent. And the cost of living in an apartment for 37 years in Warren County of some sort of rental property has cost me 2.5 times the price of a house, including the taxes, all right? And I don't think that, anybody that's a renter or a dweller would appreciate increases to our landlord due to lack of development. So that's my portion. That's what I'll put into it. And then anybody that lives in a home, what you'll be looking for in the future is the taxes. The price of running the town will go up. However, your employment may change.
Right.
Your housing situation may change. And it's never a stable thing, and it's always moving forward. So, you face a lot of situations. So I'd say with the development, go forward with the development. Go forward with that development. That's all I'd say. Go forward with development. You've got good points to some extent, but to keep delaying is running up a bill for later situations. And the school bill goes up every year.
Are you referring to the Piazza tract?
I'm referring to the Piazza tract. I'm referring to our rent tenants too.
Okay.
I'm referring to the rents that have to be charged to raise the taxes in comparison to the homes, the rate of homes being paid. On our 34 acres, there'd be about 60 homes. 60 homes times the median tax rate in this community would figure out what is what we're generating, what 60 homes would generate, and then you look at what we generate. So
and you take half of it and you send it to the school.
So that's all I want to make.
So that the Piazza tract will be developed.
Yes.
So it is going to happen. I don't know.
Yes. I know. I'm not against the Piazza tract. I think the Piazza tract is something that should happen. But I also think that the forcing over of the taxation situation onto renters, that's good, clean industry. It's been good, clean industry I've been involved in my entire existence here in Warren County.
Yep.
And I paid for 2.5 houses, 2 houses plus up the taxes. So I would appreciate after 37 years of this to keep going forward in that direction. Okay, so I just wanted to make my opinion known, Eric.
Thank you very much.
And board members, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. All right. That's all. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second, somebody? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.